Today I am beginning the first part of Epic History's World War II series, which is, at the time of this recording, not completed. He has so far 3 public episodes, so yeah, we're gonna be beginning with the first part that I can see according to the playlist, which is the road to World War II, 1931 to 34. I've often said a few times in the past of this channel that there are some topics I kind of put off for a while, American history being one, and World War II kind of being the big second one. It's not that I don't care about these things, it's just, I tend to want to explore things I'm not that familiar with, if that makes sense, you know? That's why, as I cover a lot of European and Eastward history, because I'm not familiar with it, and I like kind of learning things that I'm not, all that aware of. And, like, here in America, obviously, a lot of American history, and obviously a lot of World War II. Dude, so much World War II. And it's not just like through the education system, but it's just through movies and entertainment. Like, there's like a billion World War II movies, and I don't know, sometimes when I'm too overly exposed or too familiar with something, I kind of lose enthusiasm for it. I'm like, I'd rather talk about anything else. So that's kind of why I've put off for a long time on this channel, American and World War II content, but I feel finally ready to step in, and I don't want to come across like I know everything. I'm not like a World War II expert or American history expert where I can just tell you everything, but like, it's that feeling when you're too familiar with something. I'm kind of bored, or a little bored, or not as enthusiastic about it. But as of late, I have been thinking, you know what, maybe I should just dive right into it, and definitely start exploring more. Like, I'm planning on covering this World War II series, and then the American videos from Epic History, so yeah, overall it'll be really cool, because there's still, I have no doubt, plenty to learn, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully learning new things from a great epic YouTuber, no pun intended. So yeah, if you want to watch the original video by Epic History, the link is down in the description down below. And if you enjoy my content and you want to help me out in any way, shape, or form, feel free to please like, comment, subscribe, and maybe consider becoming a Patreon member. It's only for $1 a month, and it would help me out immensely. Now, without any further ado, let's do. Yeah, this is a very famous quote about the ending of World War I. This is not a peace, this is an armistice for 20 years, and boy, Ferdinand must have felt like a prophet. Granted, though, I think everyone knew, but he definitely put it into words that, yeah, this is kind of creating an awful situation. Because, obviously, like, with what happened with Germany, and just the incredibly harsh peace treaty that was imposed upon them. Yeah, like, you've often heard it said, like, yeah, like, something like what was gonna happen, like World War II was inevitable just by the peace of World War I. And I do agree, because, yeah, again, Germany got screwed hard after the First World War. And it's hilarious, because, they weren't even the cause of it. But often, history is written by the victors, is the famous quote. And, we kind of really, I guess, focus a lot on Germany's, I guess, less than savory moments, such as what happened in Belgium, for example, right? And, yeah, again, but still, like, I think the treaty was super harsh on Germany, and it was not a great way to, like, reintegrate them back. It definitely was a big cause of resentment, and did lead to the events that would unfold.
(1931) the world's leading powers are reeling from the impact of the Great Depression. Global trade has collapsed by 2/3. Unemployment is soaring. Economies around the world are in turmoil. In the United States, the world's largest economy, President Herbert Hoover struggles to provide an effective response. Great Britain, ruling the world's largest empire, is in financial and political crisis. France, ruling the second largest empire, is slightly better protected, but will soon face economic challenges of her own. The Soviet Union, the world's only major socialist state, remains an international pariah. It is therefore largely insulated from the global crisis and is about to complete Stalin's first 5-year plan, a program intended to rapidly boost Soviet industrial and agricultural output. In Asia, China escapes the worst of the Depression, but faces crises of its own. That year, devastating floods claim an estimated 2 million lives, while
like I'm saying, we covered the Epic Histories series about China. Holy crap. I think that series might have the highest body count I've ever witnessed. Just the sheer amount of death and the fact that China came out of all of that a superpower is like baffling to me, but also super like amazing at the same time. And you know, I have to give it to Joseph Stalin. Like his reign, you know, very brutal, saw a lot of death, especially like with the whole 5-year plan, you know, but like he definitely, it is so interesting to see like China and Russia, these two, you know, giant communist states, came out of really bad situations, like between, you know, World War I and the civil wars in Russia and everything that happened in China, and they both came out superpowers and just stronger than ever. It really does kind of remind me of the quote, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. In this case, since a lot of people did die, I guess what does kill you also makes you stronger. I don't know, but still, it is kind of cool that these two kind of, yeah, were in really bad situations at the start, like pre-World War, you know, one, and just went through all of that and just, yeah, came out better at the end. I don't know, that's pretty cool at the end. I find like a weird parallel between the two.
Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government fights a brutal civil war against Chinese communist rebels. In 10 years, these 5 states, the USA, Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and China, will constitute the major Allied powers in the largest conflict in human history, World War II. However, in 1931, there is little to indicate that such a catastrophe is looming or inevitable. But that year, these same world events are shaping the paths of 3 other nations. Germany, humbled and humiliated by defeat in World War I, is now a fragile democratic republic. No nation is hit harder by the Great Depression than Germany, thanks to its reliance on US loans, which have now ended abruptly. Banks and businesses collapse. Unemployment leaps to 24% and will peak the following year at 40%. In July, President Hoover offers some relief. Germany's war reparations, the money she must pay to the victors of World War I, will be suspended. But the hardship experienced by ordinary Germans is reshaping German politics, as support drifts to the far left and far right. Italy is now a one-party fascist state, ruled by dictator Benito Mussolini, who's held power since 1922. Italy is also hit hard by the Depression, though massive state intervention alleviates some of the pain.
Gosh, Jordan.
And in East Asia, the Empire of Japan. Here, the impact of the Depression is not as severe, but within this mixed democracy, there are alarming signs of political extremism and militarism. In 9 years, these 3 states, Germany, Italy, and Japan, will form a military alliance commonly known as the Axis. All have something in common. Germany, unified in 1871. Italy, unified in 1861. Japan, an ancient state reinvented by the Meiji Restoration of 1868.
Wow. This is really interesting. I will say though, I that kind of does that is such a cool thing to have in common. Kind of like all, yeah, having these like revamps, right? Because we did cover the German unification, obviously a bit of the Italian one, and Japan's modernization once they were kind of forced to open up, all around the same time. That's actually really cool. I did not know they had that in common. I guess you think that's something that they bonded over? Like, hey, I wonder if they were aware of that themselves or just like kind of like bonded about that. I like to think that they did. Like, hey, we're all kind of new in a sense, you know, like the new bloods. So, I don't know, that's really cool actually. I love that.
In historic terms, all are young nations.
Yeah.
And all feel unjustly treated by the World War I peace settlement.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember when we were covering, I forgot what video, but like how did Europe react to the German unification, and how in some ways the newfound Germany, even though like obviously in the grand scheme of things super young, like as a nation like he just mentioned, kind of like not treated as well by their neighbors, and probably a big combination, right? Like not only is a new power been born, you know, humiliated the other great powers such as Austria and, you know, France in particular, and that kind of disrupts the whole power dynamic in Europe, probably like stuff like that, suspicion, that in some ways that they were kind of not treated as well, if I'm remembering from that video correctly, and that was a big part of resentment. And obviously with Italy, despite being on the winning side in the First World War, you know, didn't have the big. There were a lot of promises made to Italy to get them on because a lot of people were kind of courting Italy. And Italy did not deliver in the First World War I. At least not the big shift of momentum that I think the European powers were hoping for. So at the end, Italy got less than what they wanted, and that was a huge cause of resentment. So yeah, there's definitely we've kind of covered a bit of why the hostilities would exist and why these guys would kind of band together. Yeah, there is that shared common resentment of, man, we got screwed post World War I. We deserve better, you know?
In all, there are now growing demands for what older, established powers already have, and what they have been denied. Empire. It is empire that is seen to confer status, security, and prosperity. A panacea to troubles at home. A fulfillment of destiny abroad. The 1930s, a decade of economic turmoil and failing international cooperation, will offer a window of opportunity to these 3 powers. An opportunity to avenge past humiliations. and seize the empires they believe are rightfully theirs. It is a path that will put Germany, Italy, and Japan on a collision course with the established great powers, with disastrous consequences for the world.
No kidding.
This video is sponsored by Hearts of Iron 4, the game that...
Yeah, you know, there's kind of like a lot of, you often hear a lot of jokes at the League of Nations expense, like especially around this time, because stuff like they weren't good, you know, in doing what they were created to do, which, yeah, it's hard to disagree with that personally. Yeah, the League ended up just kind of being failing, to put it nicely, and yeah, the entire world is suffering from a terrible crisis and lack of confidence. The last hopes of the world are now in our hands. Oh boy.
The first major international crisis of the 1930s is in Manchuria, northeastern China. Japanese nationalists see China as the natural arena for their imperial expansion, and Japan has been extending its influence here over many years. There is already a large Japanese military force based in Dalian, known as the Kwantung Army. Now, nationalist officers from this army decide to force the hand of their own government. Acting on their own initiative, they blow up a section of Japanese-owned railway. A false flag operation that becomes known as the Mukden Incident. The Kwantung Army uses it as a pretext to invade Manchuria. Local Chinese troops are no match for modernized Japanese armed forces. And Chinese President Chiang Kai-shek is more focused on fighting his internal communist enemies in the south. In 3 months, the Japanese overrun most of Manchuria and turn it into their own puppet state, Manchukuo. The Japanese people are jubilant. The country has been gripped by war fever. But Western powers are...
I never heard of that saying before. You know what's the saying I always hear about? War weariness. But I guess, yeah, war fever it would be like the opposite of that. I've never heard that phrase used, but I like it. That's a great way to put it.
Are outraged. Japan's attack is a flagrant breach of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This treaty, just 3 years old, committed all signatories, including Japan, to giving up war as a tool of national policy. The League of Nations, the international organization that is supposed to safeguard world peace, meets urgently in Geneva. But Japan is one of the League Council's 4 permanent members, and rather than condemn the attack, the League decides to send a commission to investigate. A few weeks later, further fighting breaks out in Shanghai. But it is clear that Western powers, distracted by the economic crisis, will not go to war for the sake of China. Their inaction is noted by observers across the world.
Yep. You know, inaction's kind of a big part of the opening stages of World War II. Like, you think, I know we'll get to it later, but like the idea of appeasement is kind of thrown around, especially in regards to Adolf Hitler. We'll definitely cover that later on, but yeah, like there's a saying I think it's like, I'm gonna butcher it, you guys will probably know the exact words, but I'm gonna try to get the general idea across. Like, evil thrives when good men or something do nothing, or when people do nothing. Um, something like that. I think that that quote definitely. I do believe it's true. It's like if you don't you know, step in, definitely people are just gonna keep going and doing whatever they want. So I do feel like that quote kind of applies to a bit of the opening stages of World War II in a sense. War puts the stamp of nobility on those who have the courage to meet it. What is fascism? Benito Mussolini.
1932 begins with an Italian victory in Libya, where General Badoglio declares the end of a 9-year campaign to crush local resistance to Italian rule. Italy's armed forces have used chemical weapons, concentration camps, and mass executions against the Libyan people. Their successful pacification allows Mussolini to plan fresh conquests as he dreams of a new Roman Empire.
Boy. You, you know, yeah, so Benito Mussolini, that's something that's talked about with him, this dream of a new Roman Empire and the restoration of the Roman Empire, basically what everyone has been obsessed with since the fall of the West, restoring Rome, being the new Rome, the heir of Rome, what all that BS. And, you know, I mean, I personally think there will never be another Rome. There's only one Rome, and the Ottomans murdered it. With Mehmed when they conquered Constantinople. But you know, and I find Benito Mussolini hilarious in a sense, or maybe not him in particular. I mean, okay, what I mean by that is I find the events that surround him funny, and what I mean by that is that when we learn about Benito Mussolini, it usually goes about two ways. I find first is the beginning, right? Before the war kicks off proper, you know, he takes control of Italy, fascism, and even like you'll hear things of like Hitler kind of being inspired by him by a bit, wanting to like get close with Benito Mussolini, like all this hype, right? All this build up with him as almost like this new, you know, major player taking world stage. And then the moment that the war actually kicks off, you either don't hear much about him anymore, or if you do, it's usually his highlighting his failures, like his failed invasion of Greece, Hitler needing to bail him out. He kind of gets, when the war kicks off proper, he loses all the build-up and sort of hype he's building before the war, and then he just gets regulated to like, either you don't talk about him because everyone's focusing on the atrocities that the Germans and the Japanese are committing, or like, if you do focus on him, it's highlighting his failures, and just, he comes across more like Hitler's lackey, or Hitler's sidekick, the incompetent, like, buffoon. That's the vibe, like, in most, not only learning here in America, but like in most like World War II documentaries I see, like I said, that's usually the two approaches he take. The beginning, all this hype, all this build up, oh my gosh, he's taking center stage, fascism, becoming friends with Hitler, oh my gosh, like hype is the word I'm using. And then again, when the war kicks off, documentaries are like lessons about it. He either, like, you just stop talking about him entirely because you're going to focus on what Hitler and the Japanese are doing, or if you do talk about him, it's his failures and just coming across as just Hitler's incompetent lackey or sidekick. And if you are going to talk about achievements, it's when he's fighting armies that can't really rival him. Like, what? Didn't he invade Ethiopia when they were still using primitive weapons? And like that's not really something to be proud of. That's not like a great, conquest in a sense, because like, oh yeah, obviously, you would take them if you have tanks and they don't, and stuff like that. You get me? So I always find that hilarious. You know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony, Augustus, and Lepidus. Now, Lepidus, if you actually do kind of learn about him, he wasn't an idiot, or he kind of had his own career before that. But like most depictions of the Second Triumvirate, you get focus on Augustus, right? Mark Antony. These are the two titans. These are the ones you focus on, and then you just have Lepidus there. And Lepidus is usually depicted as being straight up irrelevant to where people don't talk about him. Or he's depicted as an idiot buffoon, third wheel. Like, you think of like the Rome HBO show where Lepidus is portrayed as a straight up idiot. I feel like Benito Mussolini in history has gotten the Lepidus treatment. That's a new phrase I'm coining. He got the Lepidus treatment of these three. So I find that funny about him, Like I said, all that hype, all that almost promise, and then once the war kicks off, he kind of becomes an afterthought. So yeah, that's why I'm like laughing, or I kind of find that funny,
In Western Europe, the site of bloody trench warfare just 14 years earlier, hopes for a lasting peace are based on the 1925 Locarno Pact. This guarantees Germany's western borders and requires Germany and its neighbours to submit all disputes to the League of Nations for mediation. There is a mood of optimism among European diplomats, known as the spirit of Locarno, a hope that war in Europe may have been consigned to the past.
It's because of the horrors of the First War, right? Is that like an idea in that, man, trench warfare was really awful, huh, guys? Like, that was literal hell on earth. So, we don't want to have another one of these, right, guys? Like, we're all in agreement with that, And I've heard oftentimes that that's a big reason as to like the later appeasement or the reluctance to go to war is because of we don't want to do another one of these. Unfortunately, what they failed to realize is that people like Hitler were more than willing to do another one of those. And I think that's the problem. They underestimated everyone's, I guess the assumption that everyone experienced such true horror in World War I that no one would want to do that again. Maybe like all traumatized. But now there's still some, like, again, Hitler, who are more than willing to go through another round. So, yeah.
In February, a World Disarmament Conference opens in Geneva, attended by 61 states. In June, the Lausanne Conference cuts German war reparations by 90%. But it will prove a false dawn. In Germany that year, federal elections are dominated by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party. His attitude to disarmament will soon become very clear. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, dictator Joseph Stalin continues his drive to make the state more resilient against external and internal enemies. His first 5-year plan focuses on expanding heavy industry, almost doubling the Soviet industrial workforce and dramatically increasing output of steel, iron and coal. It's impossible to be sure by how much, as official figures are constantly manipulated and inflated by communist officials. It's clear, however, that tank and aircraft production are expanding massively. While in Ukraine, the completion of the Dnieper Dam, the largest in Europe, gives a major boost to Soviet electricity generation. But in the countryside, The policy of forcing peasants into large, state-controlled farms, collectivization, has proved disastrous. A catastrophic collapse in the harvest has resulted in famine on a terrifying scale. The total death toll over 4 years is estimated at between 6 and 9 million. Around half these deaths are in Ukraine, where the disaster will be remembered as the Holodomor. Kazakhstan is also hard hit. Soviet authorities do everything they can to cover up the horrifying truth of what's happening. In Spain, where a new republic has been proclaimed the previous year, Prime Minister Manuel Azaña enacts sweeping reforms, aiming to modernize the country and curtail the influence of the Catholic Church. Such moves are bitterly opposed by conservatives. In neighboring Portugal that summer, António Salazar is appointed Prime Minister. He goes on to establish an authoritarian regime, Estado Novo, that he will lead until 1968. In the Middle East, the Kingdom of Iraq gains full independence from British rule and is admitted to the League of Nations. In Japan, the nationalist, militarist assault on the country's democracy steps up a gear. In February, a conspiracy to wipe out the country's leading liberal figures fails. But in May, a group of young naval officers shoot dead Prime Minister Inuke Tsuyoshi. In the United States of America, the 1932 presidential election is won by Franklin D. Roosevelt of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, Franklin D. Roosevelt is a very interesting. You often see in like lists of like greatest presidents of all time. Some of the most consistent ones in like opinions and like when you really put up like the arguments of some of the greatest presidents, the most consistent names you'll often hear is George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was he saw the nation through quite a long time, and he had like many terms. Wait. Yeah, just to kind of show you guys. Like, dude was president from like the 30s all the way to like the 40s, you know? And he saw the nation through a lot, and you know, he's kind of like, when you think of like America during this era, you definitely do think of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it's easy to see why he's kind of, his name is put among like out there as like a contender for one of the best presidents. Like the guy really he went through a lot, and even it's funny that I'm watching this now because I actually kind of have been a bit fascinated with looking a bit more into him. For instance, my favorite president for me personally is Abraham Lincoln, but yeah, I often kind of see like arguments for Franklin D. Roosevelt and why he's brought up a lot, and again, like definitely worthy of that, you know?
To combat the effects of the Great Depression, he promises a new deal for the American people. Only a foolish optimist can deny the dark realities of the moment. He will declare at his inauguration. This nation asks for action, and action now.
We are all
The Hitler experiment had to be made sometime or other, and we shall now see what it will bring forth. Oh boy. you know, there's that idea I've heard brought up, like, oh, someone like Hitler was always going to rise to power. there's like that idea I've heard thrown around that like, well, if Hitler hadn't done it, someone else would have. That point is the idea of a Hitler coming from Germany was inevitable, or something like this, just because of how much resentment and issues were going on in Germany, and you know, I'm not sure. I don't. I'm not sure how I feel about that statement because it's funny. I've heard that for so many years, even when I was in high school learning about all this stuff. Some people even brought up that idea, like, yeah, this was always kind of inevitable. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I have to really think about it. Like I said, I don't. I think the idea is that there was going to be conflict and that Germany might have been the epicenter, and I do kind of see that and agree with that notion because, yeah, Germany was going through a lot of resentment, a lot of buildup, and I do agree that another World War, yeah, was gonna happen. I just don't know about some of the events going on. I'm not sure. I'm not putting it to words correctly. There was gonna be a conflict. I just don't know about the whole Hitler thing. But yeah, probably someone tyrannical would have taken power, but I don't know. I don't know, I'm not putting it right, so I'm just gonna stop.
Germany is in political deadlock. The previous year, federal elections had filled the Reichstag with Nazis, Social Democrats, and Communists, all of whom
Guys, there's a really interesting musical that I got into as of late. Well, actually, it was last year I got into it, but let me show you. Yeah, so there's this musical called, I think it's called, what, Cabaret? I was, like, listening to it. It was around last year, actually, that I was doing this. Like, around the time we were covering, like, Alexander the Great and stuff like that. And it's a really interesting telling of the rise of, the fall of some parts of old German society as the Nazis kind of rise to power in the background and take, control of Germany. It's really haunting in a sense, especially the 1970s movie. But I think it's such a great portrayal of how the Nazis kind of took power and just kind of the rise of it. And you often hear sometimes like, Hitler making big promises and that's how he won a lot of people over, right? Because a big part of it was he wanted to kind of undo the humiliations done to Germany. And you could see why a lot of people would flock to someone charismatic, making these big promises. Or and others just kind of allowing it to happen out of sheer indifference, like, all right, yeah, Hitler. Some not even expecting Hitler to make it as far as he did, yet he still did. I don't know. There's a lot of factors, and obviously it's very complicated as all things are in life with many different perspectives and stuff. But that kind of reminds me of it, and I kind of like that idea. Like, I would really recommend you check it out. Like, I think it really is just there's one scene in particular where it's like it just straight up like the sudden shift of tone. You'll know when you get to it. It kind of reminds me. It's really haunting and almost frightening. Showing the Nazis rise to power.
test each other. In January, to break the impasse, President Hindenburg appoints a new Chancellor of Germany, the leader of the Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler.
Oh boy.
It's predicted that more moderate and experienced politicians will be able to curb Hitler's more extreme views.
I always laugh when I'm watching these videos. Like when we covered the rise of China series, and then you had that German ambassador witnessing the atrocities of the Japanese, and he's like disturbed by it. He's like, oh, I should probably tell Hitler. Hopefully Hitler can put a stop to this. It's just funny to see. I mean, I'm obviously, this is hindsight and we can kind of see, but it's funny to see just how unaware so many people were of Hitler and like and like how dangerous he really is. Like, you know, like it's like, oh snap, like a lot of people really misread the room with this guy. You feel me? Definitely did not see the writing on the wall with him. Yeah, I always kind of find that funny, but it's hindsight, right? Hindsight is 2020. But yeah, thinking, oh yeah, if we appease Hitler, he'll stop. He doesn't. He'll want to stop this violence. He'll make even more violence. We can control him. You can't. Like, you know what I mean? It's just stuff like that. Like, it's almost funny to hear.
Of which there are many. Adolf Hitler, born in Austria, had served as a senior private in the
Yeah, he was actually distinguished. I believe he got medals for bravery. I forgot what the official medal is, but I think he was distinguished for his performance in World War I. He was a soldier, obviously, and that's why a big part of why he was angry. He's like, oh man, you know, it was a big humiliation to lose the war, especially him who fought. There are accounts that he did apparently suffer from it was from a chemical attack, I believe, and he was hospitalized. I think it was mustard gas or some type of chemical thing. He was injured, point is, and some people have brought that up as a theory to maybe it may have messed up his mental stuff. And it's kind of like the King Henry effect, you know, like King Henry, the dude who like murdered a few of his wives. It's like he had a jousting accident and people speculate brain injury, and that might have like pushed his tyrannical or evil side. It's kind of like, it's brought up as a theory. I don't know if I believe it, because with Hitler fully, I mean, maybe it could have had effect, but like a part of me thinks he still might have still done it even if that hadn't happened. But like I said, it's just a theory I've heard brought up in the past that it might have messed with him mentally, and maybe it might have, maybe not, I don't know. But either way, it's still like, holy crap, you know, what he does. And you know, there's another story about Hitler in terms of, apparently he had an encounter with like a British soldier, I believe, and the British soldier didn't shoot him, so he spared Hitler. And wait, the British soldier who spared Hitler. Yes, this is it. Henry Tandy? Apparently, like, I remember hearing about this and kind of a bit looking into it. You think that dude, when did he die? Do you think he, like, recognized that and was like, holy crap? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted to do a nice thing, and then this dude went off and committed genocide. Dude, I would feel so guilty. I'd be like, oh, I should have shot that. I should have shot him in the face, you know? I don't know. I don't know. If I found out I spared someone and they went on to do what Hitler did, I would feel, I would have guilt, you know what I mean? I'm not sure. I hope the poor man didn't feel guilt, but like, I'm just speaking for myself. I'd be like, holy crap, I would feel awful. Personally. Like I said, I'm not sure. It seems real that happened, but boy, that sucks. I'm wondering how he must have felt about that, and if he recognized Hitler be the guy he spared, and how he felt about everything that transpired after. Like I said, I would be so devastated. But I think I should have shot that. I should have shot him in the face. Moral of the story: don't spare your enemies. No, I'm joking.
German army in World War I. After the war, he became leader of a fringe nationalist party based in Munich, the German Workers' Party. He renames it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party for short. Its policies combine extreme ethno-nationalism with total rejection of the Versailles peace settlement, hostility to capitalism and big business, and a rabid hatred of Jews, who are blamed for all Germany's woes. Above all, its stab-in-the-back defeat in World War I, which is itself a nationalist myth.
Yep.
Yeah,
I've heard some people say, like, he really did use the Jews as a scapegoat and kind of like this giant common enemy. Yeah, it's insane. Like I said, what Hitler does is crazy, and the fact that he did, like the fact that someone had a thought, I want to wipe out entire groups of people, and that they, like already that's bad enough having those thoughts, right? But the fact that he like went for it and was successful in killing millions is, I've said this before, I think that when I'm watching a lot of these war videos, especially in the past, it's easy in some ways to think, man, we're so much, we're more civilized in the Bronze Age, those people were more barbaric then. In some ways, yeah, we are a lot more civilized, but also in some ways we're really not, because, like, all this shows, like, the world wars is just how much more capable we are of killing each other and how frightening that power is. Like, now, if anything, we've escalated the violence and the killing potential more than people of the past could have ever dreamed of, which is frightening. And it's easy to kind of like be a bit detached when we're covering like videos from antiquity and being like, oh, look at how uncivilized they are with their, in many ways. But then like you just look at like what happened like a century or less ago, and the world wars and everything is like, holy crap, like we're still like really messed up, like it's hard to detach yourself with older points of human history. And it's like, no, we're still more than capable of doing awful things. In fact, even on greater scales than those of people of the past. And it is, like, I think very tragic that something in the modern era that this happened and that a lot of people allowed it and that it got as far as it did. I find that truth tragic, and that Hitler got as far as he did and did what he did and killed as many people as he did. It's sad, and that a lot of people, that someone could have such a insane, like the concept to me is crazy, because I like to think I'm of a mental soundness, and like I have, and I imagine we all here are civilized. Not civilized. I mean, we are, but like that, we're not insane. We're not crazy, and I hope we're not murderous. I hope none of you are murderers who are watching this. But that, like the idea of just we're gonna start wiping out entire groups of people would probably, like, it's baffling. Like, wait, what? Like, that's crazy. Like, but it's like he just went for it, and it's just sad that it all happened, and that, we as a species allowed it to happen. And it took as much effort as it did to, stop what he was doing. It's, like I said, it's tragic to me and frightening, and it shows, yeah, we're only getting more advanced with technology. We're only getting more dangerous, so it's like, I don't know, it's frightening and sad and tragic and just disgusting and just so many awful things, and Hitler is just a great example of that. You often hear the saying, right? One person can change the world, and usually that's used in a very positive context. That's usually used in, an inspirational one, like, oh man, I could change the world. But like, there's a flip side to it, I think, showing that, yeah, one person can change the world, in the worst ways possible. And yeah, it's definitely just all around sad. The Nazis are so cartoonishly evil. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you wrote, like, pretend you didn't know about this, and then, like, someone wrote a story where just a group of villains are just evil, and they just want to commit genocide, and there's, like, hardly to no redeeming qualities. Like, you would probably be criticized, like, oh man, these villains are so one-dimensional, they're just evil, you know? And then it's like, well, real life, we had the Nazis who were just so evil, and like, you know what I mean? It's like, no, it's like almost cartoonish. If it wasn't real, and like you just explained this to me, I'd be like, that's so cartoonishly evil. Like, they're just, you know, like I said, like if you wrote this into fiction without knowing all this, presented as fiction, I feel like some people would criticize it as just like being so one-dimensionally evil, you know? But it's like, nah, people can just be evil. Like, not everyone has nuance or just tragic backstories. It's, you know. Granted, Hitler did have a rough upbringing. I will not deny that, you know, between what an abusive father, you know, a rough upbringing. I cannot deny Hitler had a rough beginning for sure, but like I feel like there comes a point where you can kind of lose that sympathy or empathy. It's like, you know, like sometimes with like some serial killers, like you'll hear that they had really hard upbringings, like abuse, bullying, neglect, and like that is tragic, and you can definitely like, you know, emphasize or like sympathize and be like, yeah, you know, that's awful. But then there comes a point where you do enough bad things to where like, okay, yeah, I can't have sympathy with you anymore. Like if you start going around murdering children, you know, you lose the sympathy card regardless of how, you know, tough you had it in at first, you know? Because there are people who have really tough, hard lives, but like don't go on to kill people. So yeah, I feel like Hitler definitely crosses that line where it's like, yeah, you had it rough, but that does not excuse at all, you know, what happens later. So yeah, I don't know. I think Hitler's like the most evil person like ever, you know, in terms of what he thought, what he did. And, you know, I think he's the most evil, person ever, personally. Like, I would put him there. Yeah.
Of Hitler's own deepest beliefs on Germany's need for an empire and living space at the expense of lesser races in the East are available for anyone to read in Volume 2 of his political manifesto, Mein Kampf, published in I think
it translates to, what, My Struggle or something like that. Didn't he write it when he was in jail for a bit for trying to take power but failing? At least be at the beginning. Dude, that mustache is so awful. Like, I don't mean to sound petty, but like, holy crap, was that like the fashion then? Because that mustache is so disgusting. Like, bro, just shave, bro. I'm not sure if it was popular and probably like, oh, plenty of people wore that had that, Edwin. I'm like, well, plenty of people must have had awful taste because holy crap, that's disgusting. Like, I don't know. I just can't. I hate that mustache, bro. I could not take a man seriously if he had that. You know, at least with Joseph Stalin kind of has a magnificent mustache. Like, I look at Joseph Stalin, I'm like, that mustache radiates power. I don't like Joseph Stalin. I think he's evil too, and one of the worst humans to ever live. But like, I can't deny his mustache is fabulous. But you know, I'm just like looking at him, I'm like, ew, I like want to throw up. Just like disgusting.
26. Many Germans are disillusioned with centrist politicians and their failure to tackle the economic crisis. Hitler's powerful oratory and promise of radical solutions has strong appeal. Many middle-class Germans see the Nazis as the best way to keep the communists out of power. Now, with Hitler in charge, events begin to move quickly. In February 1933, a Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe, sets fire to the Reichstag building in Berlin. He is acting alone, but the Nazis accuse the German Communist Party of attempting a coup. Civil and political rights are quickly suspended by emergency decree. Communists are jailed, their newspapers shut down. In March, Germany holds new elections, during which the Nazis' political rivals are harassed and terrorized by their paramilitary thugs, the SA and SS. The Nazi Party wins 44% of the vote and takes effective control of the Reichstag. At the end of the month, it passes the Enabling Act. This frees Hitler from all constitutional checks and balances. He can now pass new laws without consulting the Reichstag or President Hindenburg. On the 1st of April, the Nazis organize a one-day nationwide boycott of all Jewish businesses. By the end of the summer, Nazi concentration camps have opened at Oranienburg and Dachau, and all political parties in Germany have been banned, except the Nazi Party. Hitler's next target is the despised Versailles Treaty that ended World War I. Publicly, he rejects its war reparations and the so-called War Guilt Clause that blamed Germany for starting the war. In secret, he orders large-scale German rearmament in defiance of Versailles restrictions on the size of German armed forces. The existence of an illegal German air force is already widely known, and it's growing by 60 aircraft a month. The dramatic revival of nationalism and militarism in Germany is plain for all to see.
Yeah.
At the Geneva Disarmament Conference, Germany demands parity between its armed forces and those of France. When this is rejected, Germany quits the conference. The same month, Hitler withdraws Germany from the League of Nations. It is the League's second major blow of the year. In February, the League report on Japan's invasion of Manchuria had finally been presented to the General Assembly. It had called on Japan to withdraw from Manchuria. Japan responds by quitting the League of Nations.
What a mess the League of Nations is. Oh boy, there's a lot of factors I know with its downfall, but my goodness. Like, what a mess.
The international institutions designed to maintain peace are flailing.
Japan subsequently withdrew from the League.
You had one job, League of Nations: secure peace. I'm joking around. I'm trying to have fun right now because this is a very heavy topic.
That body proved itself incapable of stemming the tide of aggression, either in Europe or in Asia.
A few foreign diplomats take the time to read Hitler's political manifesto, Mein Kampf. Some dismiss it as incoherent rambling, but others feel a deep sense of alarm. In Britain...
Yeah, dude, the writing's on the wall, like... Yeah, like, the red flags, it's like those jokes when you're, like, dating someone and they have, like, a million red flags, but you just don't care because you're so quote-unquote in love, or stuff like that. It's like that with Hitler, like, the world's relationship with Hitler at this point. Like, he's giving off so many red flags, but, again, obviously there are some people aware, but not acting, and there are some who are just not, and... Yeah, I know it's a bit mixed, but my goodness, like the red flags are everywhere. Like the warning, the writings on the wall, the warnings are everywhere of this guy is dangerous. But again, for one factor or another, whether to avoid war or just straight up inaction or, you know, all that, he's gonna still keep going unopposed for especially the opening parts of this war.
Conservative Member of Parliament Winston Churchill warns of Germany's grim dictatorship and the return of its militaristic spirit. But in the early 1930s, there is little appetite in Britain or France to confront Germany.
Yep.
The trauma of World War I is too fresh. The public mood is one of pacifism.
And again, that's understandable in a sense, because again, I can understand why these guys didn't straight up act with the hostility that, with hindsight, probably would have been more appropriate, because again, you know, no one wants another world war, except Hitler and his allies, but, you know, it's like, we kind of want to avoid this if we can, so I understand, by the way, and it's more of a hindsight thing to look at them and be like, come on guys, appeasement, really? But it is understandable as to why, you know, the earlier inaction and just the trauma of what they went through, but still, you know, overall, it is, yeah.
In Britain, some even wonder if the Versailles Treaty had been too harsh on Germany.
Well, you
Perhaps
think?
some of Hitler's demands are not so unreasonable. Besides which, the Great Depression has led to severe cuts in military spending, meaning neither Britain nor France is in any state to fight a European war. France is in the middle of a full-blown political and economic crisis. There have been 10 governments in the last 3 years.
Holy crap.
National income has fallen by 30%. Defense spending has fallen by 25%. But the French are working on a major military project, which they believe will ensure national security for years to come. In the US, meanwhile, there is strong support for isolationism and a desire to avoid all overseas entanglements. The US is not...
I'm sorry, hearing some of this stuff, knowing what's about to happen, like I said, hindsight makes everything funnier in some ways. This is America's strategy, huh? Like, sit out the opening parts of both world wars, and then join in. We did that twice, huh? Like, you know, we just kind of, we're not there, we're not involved. And then, like, later on, we'll be like, okay, we're involved now, we'll jump in. Like, I don't know, I always found that funny.
a member of the League of Nations, and facing 25% unemployment, Roosevelt is fully preoccupied with domestic politics.
Germany is again the Germany of before the war, with a new fanatical look in its eyes. Harold Nicholson, British diplomat. Oh, here we go.
In June, Hitler orders a ruthless purge of the Nazi Party's paramilitary wing, the SA, or Brown Shirts. Brown shirt violence and intimidation have been a crucial part of Hitler's rise to power. But they have served their purpose and are despised by the German army, whose loyalty Hitler now values more.
Makes sense.
In the so-called Night of the Long Knives, prominent SA leaders are rounded up and shot without trial.
Dude, yeah, I remember learning about this back like 10 years ago. Like, just... boy.
Since 1932, Austria has been a right-wing, one-party state, led by Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss. He regards the Nazis as dangerous rivals, and has banned the party in Austria. In July 1934, Austrian Nazis assassinate Dollfuss, part of an attempted coup that is to pave the way to unification with Germany, known as Anschluss. They expect support from Hitler. But Mussolini has other ideas. He regards Austria as an important buffer state between Italy and Hitler's resurgent Germany. So he sends Italian troops to the Brenner Pass on the Austrian border, threatening to intervene if Hitler attempts to annex Austria. Germany's armed forces are still very weak. Hitler is forced to back down. The Nazi plot in Austria fails. In August 1934, 86-year-old German President Hindenburg dies in office. As a war hero and statesman, he receives a lavish state funeral. Hindenburg's authority and conservatism has acted as a limited check on Hitler's actions. No longer. Hitler swiftly abolishes the office of president. He will now wield its powers in his new role as Führer of the German state and people. On the 20th of August, a new law requires all German military officers and civil servants to swear an oath of personal loyalty
The Mediterranean diet is the world's healthiest.
to Hitler. That October, King Alexander of Yugoslavia makes a state visit to France. Alexander is regarded as a crucial unifying figure for the young Yugoslav state. But on his arrival in Marseille, he is assassinated by a Bulgarian nationalist. French Foreign Minister Louis Barthou is also killed in the crossfire. That autumn, Britain learns that the German army is now 300,000 strong, 3 times what is permitted under the Versailles Treaty. Germany has further plans for expansion and mechanization.
Again, the flags are super red right now, right? The writing's on the wall, holy crap.
Tentative British steps towards rearmament begin, with a commitment to expand the Royal Air Force by 40 squadrons in 4 years. In December, there's a further blow to attempts to limit global rearmament when Japan announces it will not renew the Washington Naval Treaty. Signed in 1922, the treaty had fixed the size of British, American, and Japanese fleets in the ratio 5-5-3. This is now seen as an insult to Japan's status as a major power. Though one Japanese naval officer has pointed out that the treaty may have been to Japan's advantage, given the US's far greater industrial capacity. He is Rear Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. Thank you to Hearts of Iron 4.
Alright, so that's the end of the first part.
Just Keith Herbert, Drunkle Crow.
Alright guys, so that's the end of the first part. Overall, really cool. It's cool to kind of be revisiting this stuff. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next parts, which I'll be covering in due time. So, I'll see you guys next time. Bye everyone.